Welcome back, everybody. Zach Shelley here with another awesome episode of Management Unfiltered. And we have right next to me,
Kirk Teachout. It is so nice to hear, or I guess speak to everybody again this week. I know a lot of us right now, as we're recording this, are in the midst of Snowmageddon. The craziness that went through and came through the U.S., except Florida said, no, sir. No, sir. We're going to stay in the 70s and 80s. So today's episode, we're going to talk about how do we navigate the unexpected? Because that is what happened this week. Like, what are we doing? Is it going to be worse than it needs, or like than it's predicting to be? Is it going to be better than it needs? It's predicting to be. And how do we navigate not only patient expectations, but also team expectations? I know I've been getting a lot of those questions this week, like, hey, what do I do? How do I say this? How do I get the team to come back? So let's start there. I know, you don't know this, Zach, but the rest of the U.S. gets very cold temperatures. It is currently 7 degrees where I am, and I have 3 to 4 inches of ice on top of 8 inches of snow. So if you can imagine your temperatures being like that, and like, for instance, I just canceled the rest of the week, so we're probably losing about 70 to 80 grand this week. But we're really not. Okay. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that here in a little bit. But if you can imagine, like, what would you say compares to what we're going through right now?
Well, first off, I want to touch Florida does get cold. It's 53 degrees here right now. But let me paint this picture for you with 99% of our weather being over 80 degrees year round. This week, the lows will not get over 39 for 10 days. We actually will be at 25 degrees on Sunday. So I don't believe it either. It's crazy. But if that's the case, I'm working up really, really early with the boys, and we're making a video of making artificial snow here in Florida because we never get that opportunity to be below freezing for more than like an hour. So we are going to whop out the pressure washer. We're going to mist the air, and we're going to get some water to freeze so we can actually make it snow in Florida. That's about as cold as it gets. We don't know how to handle ourselves because we don't have warm clothes, and baggies and a t-shirt don't work when it's 24 degrees or 25 degrees. But we do have something very significant and very comparable when it comes to office closures and unpredictable of knowing how bad it's going to be or not going to be. And that's a beautiful thing called hurricanes. And we have an entire season, y'all, of several months of unexpectedness of, crazy storms. And, they always get hyped up of they're going to hit you. They're not going to hit you. It's going to kill everybody. It's not going to kill everybody. You're never going to, everything's going to flood. Nothing's going to flood. You don't know what's going to happen. It's really hard to navigate. And one thing that we whenever we bring somebody on board with our team, they always ask if what happens during hurricane season. And we let everybody know right off the bat. There's a lot of benefits that we offer. One of the things with unexpected closures, we don't pay. Like if we're not working, we're not producing, you don't pay. If you have PTO, that's what it's for. So make sure you have some harbored, and that's one way we buffer the overhead cost. Some people may say, "Oh man, that's not cool," but at the same time, the practice isn't making a penny. Like we are literally canceling everything, but we're still paying all of our monthly dues and fees that are incorporated with the practice. So we're still accumulating overhead. So we set that expectation from the beginning, so it's not a surprise to anybody. So team members can prepare, and if they didn't prepare, quite honestly, it's one of those where we say, hey, we let you know way in advance. So that's really on you at that point. Now we do give opportunity when we're able to get in. If people need to get in before the office is opening and need to make up some hours, we have lots and lots and lots of patients to call. But there's a lot of strategies you have to kind of look out for, because there's some that you can buffer and then there's some that you can't. And also just balancing the patient expectations. Like when somebody's hygiene appointments canceled or treatment appointments canceled, especially if they're in pain, they want to get in as soon as possible. And you know how the schedule is when you get back from a, let's just say a natural disaster, right? Even all this ice that you're experiencing, Kirk, it's creating all kinds of damage all over. It's intense, and you have to be able to manage, because patients even though they're going through the exact same thing you are, they don't have the same expectation. Like, why can't you see me and get my tooth fixed? Like, I want to be in yesterday. And it's like, yeah, but we were covered by 6 feet of ice. Like, you literally couldn't move your car because it was frozen in the ground.
Yeah, but on the other side, they also are the ones that are like, oh, I'm not getting out, right? So like you have two sides to the coin there. So you have those patients that will show up and like, why are you not here, you pansies, right? And we're like, yes, but you got to remember, I have 2,000 people I've got to figure stuff out for, right? So, and I've got to go with what the majority can come to. So like, for instance, like I said, I just canceled the rest of the week because I know, like I tried to get my truck out of the driveway yesterday. I had to rock it back and forth just to get it onto the driveway because of where it sits. And I'm just sitting on ice. And it never compressed down into the snow. So I know that the schools are going to be closed for the rest of the week because it's not going to get even above freezing until Thursday or Friday to even start melting. So, that's where you've got to look at your team. You got to look at your schedule. And there's a delicate balance here for sure. But, in some areas, I was just talking to a client who's in Philly who was like, oh yeah, we're opening up today. They got, 14 inches of snow, but they also have like 100 snow plows to get things going. And that's fine. Whereas we have one snow plow for the whole county because we never get this kind of weather. Right.
Yeah. Well, listen,
So
we're
you
taking
gotta-
a
you
little
gotta-
bit of that weather the end of this week for you, Kirk. You're welcome. Florida's taking one for the team. So you guys can warm up.
No, you're creating it. Okay. You didn't get the weather that we did. But either way, there's a delicate balance. So I do think that what you said was very important, right? Setting the expectations, especially when you have a whole season dedicated to a hurricane, right? It's like, what happens? So this is where having a handbook is very valuable. Okay. So a reference of, hey, if this happens, then this is what happens. This is what triggers this, right? So, it's the same for us. We don't pay when we're out unless you have PTO, like you don't get paid, right? But what's funny is that, I guess not funny, but what's a good thing is that when we tell our team like, hey, we're not coming in today, they don't mind that because they also were concerned about coming into the practice.
Yeah, there comes a point too, right? Like that's where we juggle with hurricanes. It's like what day to close because some people are like I need to prepare because for hurricane season it's a lot. Like especially if you have a lot of windows that you need to have covered or shuttered or boarded, furniture. If you're getting out of town, so one of those things like we do is who needs to prepare. Like we do it in huddle. We're like, who needs to still prepare? Who needs help? And they're like, well, I'm leaving. Okay, perfect. Go. If you're leaving, like we don't hold our team back from leaving if they have to get out of town. We just say, you know what, we're going to deal with it. We're going to work with it. But, preparing is a big thing of giving them the opportunity. And, we had some people like, how dare you make us come into work? I'm like, I'm not forcing you to come into work, but the weather's not going to be bad. And it's like 30-mile-an-hour winds. I'm like, the weather's not coming for 2 days. Like, so you get that, kind of bipolar two sides of the coin too, where some people are like, I want to work as long as I can. And some are like, I don't want to work a week up to it and a week after it. And it's like, you have to have some sort of balance. But one thing I wanted to mention that we do, not a lot of other practices probably have this ability, but with the size of our hygiene team, our part-time hygienists would actually pick up hygiene days after storms in order to make up as many hygiene patients as we possibly could, because hygiene was one of the hardest catch-up points that we spent 1 year. We were closed like an entire week, and that was like 190 hygiene patients just on one side that we had to work back in. And it took like 6 months to get them all back in and back on schedule because it was just so chaotic. Anytime there's a cancellation, it was like boom, throwing somebody in. So you have to come up with an idea or a plan, or if you have an extra room or a standby hygienist that you can add extra time or hours, or maybe you were doing, 2 hours in hygiene for a new patient and splitting it with a doctor's op and having the doc see them for the comp and FMX and only do the prophy and perio charting and fluoride in the hygienist column so you can open up more time, and maximize I see your face going all kinds of crazy, Kirk.
So many things, right? But that's the thing, especially for practices like mine where we're booked out to June right now, right? It's like, crap. Where do we put all these people, right? And so what we do is we leave them there, and that's the first place that we go to get people on the schedule when we have a cancellation. And then we just those, like I said, those are the first people we call. But and that's the hardest part for me. I said earlier, it's we may lose $70,000 to $80,000 this week. That's not true. That's what a lot of people feel. A lot of people have more of a scarcity mindset, like, oh, I'm not producing, so I'm losing money. But you're really not losing money. You're just delaying your money.
Yeah, exactly. If you can book them back in a timely manner.
Correct. And yes, you will lose probably 10 to 20% of those people. Like, though, they won't get back on the schedule, but that's okay. Like, it's not going to be detrimental to your business, right? Yeah, your cash flow may be off for a little bit, but that's also a different problem you have, right? It's like, maybe you should have a nest egg to weather the storm, literally, right? But now let's pivot just a little bit, because this was something that if you had a practice during COVID that people really struggled with, and sometimes right now with people with the snow, like the unknown or like a hurricane, right? So like, what do you do when you really are struggling, when half your team is okay with coming back, but maybe half your team is not okay with coming back? How do you lead that team to get in and get the job done?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of what we did is we set guidelines of reasonable expectations, but also not allowing the team to dictate the choices of what the business is doing. So basically saying, okay, after the storm, we're giving you guys 24 hours, to get everything back. Now, the only caveat is if we had power or not, right? That's a big thing with hurricanes, is not having power. We can't work. So we would always lead off with, okay, after the storm, we're going to check everybody in, make sure that you all are okay, who has power, who doesn't have power, and really did it case by case basis of who has power, who doesn't, who has the support they need. And then go from there. And then it would give us the ability of what we're opening back up, what we're able to actually see for patients, or if we can double up, half the side's pediatric. So there's the ability to put siblings together, to bulk appointments together. On the general side, typically didn't have a big issue, but it was really the biggest barrier was people not having their day-to-day necessities, like being able to, have hot water, have electricity, cook food. If a team member didn't have that, I mean, there's nothing I can do to really push them into saying, hey, you have to come work now on top of all that. When you just lost all your food in your fridge, hundreds of dollars of that, and just not able to have your day to day. So we really set clear expectations of like what we expect coming back. And also, that I would be the first one at the practice after the storm, one to check to see if there's any damage, to see if we have power, get an update on power. And we dealt with, several days of power loss with the last storm, and just kept everybody in the loop and said, hey, tentatively, this is the day we're coming back. We're trying to get power up and running. This is what happened. And then everybody knows what's going on. And then it's like, everyone's going to be here. And if you have something you need to talk to me about, contact me directly. And I have individual conversations with team members to see what their expectations are. Because sometimes Florida will literally shut its border down if it's bad enough to where you cannot get into the state. Even if you live there, there'd be certain areas they wouldn't let you in just because you had to drive through other disaster zones. So we had to be very sensitive to those issues, but we were luckily able to navigate those situations well with setting expectations.
Yeah, I mean, Florida is great at doing that. I mean, they just did it with the ice storm, right? It was like, no, sir, you can't come in. No, I think I want to focus on what you said there. We communicate with the team on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I think that's where we mess up a lot as leaders, is the lack of communication. We know kind of what we're thinking, but we don't communicate it to the rest of the team very effectively, because we assume that everybody looks at it through the same lens that we do, and they don't. Otherwise, they would be a practice owner, right? or a manager. So, the communication aspect of it has got to be there. It was the same thing with COVID. We were texting everybody or calling everybody once every couple days, just to be like, hey, this is where we are. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to help you get your unemployment, all these things. And so that way, when it came time for us to come back, we had that constant communication. And they trusted us, and they knew that we were trying to do our best to get us back to normal, right? Not just be like on a whim, like, okay, guys, we're coming in on Tuesday. Okay, but what does that mean, right? Okay, is everything fine? Like, what you haven't told us anything up until this point, right? So if you can communicate very effectively, that's a good option. But I would also add on a little bit more is, as a leader, this is also a time where you need to have made more deposits into your team, positive deposits, and less withdrawals. So that way their jar of leadership effectiveness is high. Because sometimes, yes, as leaders, we have to make tough calls, and we have to maybe do some things that are unpopular with the rest of the team. But at the end of the day, if we got to keep the doors open, we've got to keep the doors open.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes too, things that you can pull out of your bag is if other offices that maybe are still not ready to get up and rolling, but people are needing to work, and you utilize the network you have with other practice. Say, hey, if any of your team members need to work, we're open. We have power. We can bring them over here and get them on, to temp until your office is up and running. If you're down a team member, you can learn to work together with people in your community. Or say it's a specialty practice where it's when you refer to and they're not able to see patients, or they're like, listen, we closed for the week. We got people that need to work. I talk with office managers all the time in our area of like, hey, you got anybody that wants to work today? And they're like, yeah, because they know I'm not going to steal them, right? So you got to be ethical on this and not go and say, yeah, I'm going to go take all your team members. But that's another tactic that you can use as long as you've built those relationships. Some of you might be like, oh crap, that would have been great, but I burned that bridge. So try to repair that so you have that ability to utilize people from other teams. It's a great tool to use.
If we have more of an abundance mindset and not our practice is competing with yours, because there's plenty of patients for everybody. Like, we're not going to run out of patients. It's not going to be bad. So just going and grabbing lunch with an office manager, going and grabbing lunch with another practice owner. I love seeing the local practice owners that are in our town at the local stores and stuff. And we'll just talk like, hey, how's everything going? And just seeing how everything, and if there's anything you can do to help, right? It's really beneficial for everybody because it's a win-win for everybody. But guys, I know we wanted to hit on this a little bit because I know I'm getting a lot of these questions this week of what to do when you're expecting an unexpected, weather situation or hurricane or tornado. I know, like, we had a tornado rip through our town a quarter of a mile away from our office, right? What do you do, right? These are some of the things that we use in our practices and or former practices to really lead the team through the unexpected. I think that's the most important is communication, right? And you got to lead the team through it to where they know that you're giving them the best advice that is the best for them and also the patients, right? It's not profits over people, it's people over profits, but you still have to run a business. So, Zach, as we close here, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to retouch on the point, guys. Over communicate with your team. Sit them all down. Get everybody in one room. Don't do this telephone game. Don't do a text thread. Do it in person. When you're going to have everybody there with it coming. Have the conversations early. Have them multiple times a year when you're getting ready to get into the season of real cold weather. Even if you don't get snow a lot or ice a lot, like, hey, if this happens again, this is what it's going to be. Just a reminder to prepare yourselves as we get into this season. Just so, your team members aren't going to listen from year over year. You've got to keep reminding them and telling them to prepare. It's just like anything. We get kind of complacent. We get into that groove like, it happened last year. We're not going to get it this year. But like, you don't know that. So have them be cautious, have them prepare, be aware of what the office protocol is, have an employee manual. That's an amazing tool to have that you can always refer to, as long as you're, getting it to your team when you onboard them, and they sign that they've received it and they have a copy, because that's enforceable. That's able to say, hey, we've set the expectation for you. This is our company policy. And then there's just, you avoid a lot of these really hard conversations that you really don't need to be having. And then just guide your team through it. We're all going through it together. People have different feelings through it. You got to have some compassion towards this. Some people get freaked out with it. Like with hurricanes, I had, people that some were crying and some were like, I'm just so over this, and it's just, everybody treats these situations completely different. And they have family members that kind of input information too, that can be scare tactics, or like, why are you working? You should be home. Don't work. Don't show up. So you gotta weigh all the things that are coming in, and where the information's coming from to your team members. And just have a bit of compassion about that. Ask the right questions and over communicate.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for going back over that, Zach. Well, guys, this has been another great episode of Management Unfiltered. Make sure you hit the YouTubes, leave us a 5-star review, and get in our our DMs. Yeah, slide in. Hit me up at Kirk Teachout on Instagram. Get in the Dental Office Management Leadership Network in the group. And then it's Domlin. I'm just going to say Domlin. So get in Domlin. Make sure you let us know what you want to hear. We love you guys. We hope everything's going. I know we're going to be at some conferences here this year, so make sure to come and reach out to us and hang out. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Until next time, guys, have a great week.
Come on, give me some.